Welcome to the show that has it all. This is the Betfred Super League.
What a game!
Champions, challengers, newcomers, leagues faithful. Hold on tight. This is the Betfred Super League 2024. There's nothing like league.
Yeah. No! Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped my ear off. What do you think?
Hello and welcome along to another edition number 121 of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast. 30 minutes or thereabouts, bringing you all the gossip and discussion points from the great game of rugby league. Here with the blessing of the game's major sponsor, Betfred. So, as I say, episode number 121. Now, I'm no mathematician, but multiply that by 30, divide it by 60, which means we've brought you over 60 hours or 2.5 days non-stop of rugby league talk since we began this podcast all those months ago. Thanks very much for sticking with us. And in all the time we've been doing this, I don't think we've had a newsier week than the past 7 days. Players coming and going, even coming back. And Stevo, the most dramatic news came when Sam Tomkins announced he was making a return to the playing arena for the Catalan Dragons, having retired after the grand final in 2023 with a serious knee problem. He'll likely be back in the next week or so. This was incredible news. Is it a gamble, though, do you think?
Yes, Eddie, I'm afraid it is. And I think that the coach, McNamara, he'll be delighted to be able to perhaps rely on someone that has done a good job for him over the years. It may be a little bit of a boost PR-wise in trying to impress upon the fans that, look, we may not have been playing as well as we have done over the last 2-3 years, but I'm bringing back the star, Sam Tomkins. You know, sometimes doing something like this is not only good for the team, but it's also good for the fans.
Yes, it's a great PR stunt. There's no doubt about that. Steve McNamara quoted as saying, delighted to have his leader back. But look, Steve, a knee injury, and we remember seeing him throughout 2023, you know, favouring the other leg. The knee was all heavily strapped up. I mean, it's different wandering around Catalan and getting on a plane and doing your Sky Sports stuff than actually training and going hell for leather for 80 minutes. He's 35 years old, for goodness sake. He's 36 next March.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy for the team itself. But as I say, the PR exercise is obviously going to be good. Whether he can transfer that back into his old playing days. I mean, this was one of the greatest in modern rugby league. Sam Tomkins was outstanding, went down to play in the Australian League, experience, played for his country. So therefore, McNamara is taking that gamble. And I think mainly he wants to put him at full back so that he can move the present fullback into the halfback position, because the scrum half and the standoff has been the biggest problem for Catalan this year.
I was going to ask you about that. You know, Arthur Morg, he was, the man who was going to fill in for Sam Tomkins at fullback. He's playing really well. I just wonder, bringing a 35, 36-year-old back and the comeback Sam Tomkins is saying might continue on even until next year if it goes well. What does it say about Arthur Morg at the Catalans?
Well, obviously McNamara wants a little bit more explosive talent in the two areas which every rugby league team has to have good players. And they're the two halfbacks. And they have not been firing as they should. And if they don't connect with the three-quarter line, after good work in the forwards, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball. All you've got to do is ensure that the 2 halfbacks take control of rugby league. It isn't as though anybody says, oh, that's a bit of magic. It's the truth. They are the most important players. Maybe you could throw in the hooker as an added extra, in as much that they control the entire game. And if they do it well, they win. And that's obviously what McNamara wants to do, is to bring Morg into more action than having to play him at full back. Now, if you were going to put someone with experience, that would be the position that you'd take a gamble with, and that's why Tomkins will play in the number 1 shirt.
Talking of the Catalan Dragons, Michael McAlorum is another big name who is on the move. He goes to Hull Kingston Rovers in 2025. You know, Catalan, Stevo, they're busy in the transfer market with ins and outs as well. 6 current internationals now heading out of Perpignan at the end of the year. McAlorum, 37. He's even older than Tomkins. A new lease of life for him at Rovers. He's gone well in France.
Yeah, of course he has. And there's only one reason why Hull Kingston Rovers has forked out quite a lot of money to get McAlorum to come to the Rovers, is for one thing. He will add plenty of fire in the pack. And it's something that obviously Rovers needed. They've got a good, solid squad. They've got good 3/4. They've got 2 great halfbacks. But they need a little bit more fire in the forwards. And if I had to say, who would you select to put some fire into a team? I'd pick out Mr. McAlorum.
Well, he's on his way to Rovers 2025. Another big name, Stevo, John Bateman. He's signed a short-term deal with Warrington until the end of this season. Now, he's a grand final winner, of course, with Wigan. He'll return at the end of the year, they say, to fulfil the final 2 years of his contract with the West Tigers in the NRL. Is this a statement of intent for Warrington in 2024? Luke Yates' debut last week in the win against Saints. I dread to say this. Could this be Warrington's year?
How many years have you been saying that?
About 30, about 32.
Look, Sam Burgess is doing an absolute fantastic job at Warrington. So that's why it is a little bit of a surprise that John Bateman, that he's been one of the players that he's selected. Now, a few weeks ago, Shane Richardson, who was the CEO of the West Tigers, he made it quite clear. He was doing the rounds with all the Super League clubs and say, look, we've got 3 or 4 players that we don't want at the moment. Now, Bateman is got another 2 seasons to go down in Australia. So I think they're going to try to save themselves a bob or two by having him come back to the UK. And I suppose it's a bit of a shock, Eddie, when you think about it, that, you know, Sam Burgess has done the opposite. He's got rid of the old brigade at Warrington, brought in new, young players, healthy into it. And the only reason that I can think that he's gone for Bateman is that Bateman is one of the best defenders that you'll ever see. The man works overtime in defence. And if you want somewhere to plug, just out wide, off the region, off the centres or whatever, or even down the middle, he's the man that will stop them. He never, ever gives in. He's a wonderful defender, and that's the only reason that I can see that Burgess has elected to bring him on board.
Well, reportedly, as you rightly say, he's on £300,000 a year in the NRL. And so inevitably now questions are being asked about the Warrington salary cap. Look who they brought in at the start of the year. Lachlan Fitzgibbon, Zane Musgrove, Roderick Ty, Toby King came back on loan from his loan spell at Wigan, Sam Powell. OK, Sam Casiano, Brad Dwyer, Gil Dudson went out the other way, Matty Russell and Joe Bullock recently. And John Bateman, Stevo, is a Federation-trained player, despite the fact that he's been all over the world. So I think he only counts £100,000 on that salary cap. Marquee players, George Williams, Toby King, Matt Duffy, with a little bit of manipulation of the marquee player registration, I suppose it's possible that Warrington could fit him in and could be on the right side with this deal. I mean, they're going to be looking at the salary cap and the spend, I would think, quite closely, aren't they?
Well, they have to. I mean, in all this coming and going, they've got to make sure that they don't exceed the cap. It's simple basics, and you've got to look at the numbers. I know Shane Richardson very, very well, especially with his time when he was coaching in this country. And he made it quite clear that if he can take off 50, 60,000 of what they're having to pay Bateman down in Sydney, then it's a positive, isn't it? It's a smart move by the likes of Shane Richardson to be able to say, look, hopefully maybe we can shave off 100,000 off the salary, and you can take over and pay that amount to the player. And that's the only reason I would think that Bateman has been allowed to go, because he has not hit the top form that we've seen over many, many years. This guy is a dynamo, but I'm afraid he hasn't been working as well as he should this season, apart from his defence.
Well, let's wait and see the impact he has on Super League. It might be a breath of fresh air for him to come back as well. I mean, Steve, the money, you talking about the money every week and say the money's not in the game. I tell you what, Hull are also flashing the cash, aren't they? 6 new arrivals confirmed already. Lachlan Lamb reported to be on the way there too, although Lee insists he's going nowhere until the end of his contract at the end of next year. Hull have written off 2024. They've got some outstanding youngsters, they say, coming through. And they've got the likes of Hardacre, Abdul, Asiata, Oliver Holmes, Chamberlain, Lachlan Lamb, they keep their fingers crossed for. They have these outstanding youngsters, they say. The older group, the older recruits, meant to help the development, according to Richie Myler, the director of rugby.
Well, obviously, Hull have found a gold mine somewhere down the line, because you've just mentioned all those players, and they are not going to come for tuppence. So, as far as I'm concerned, they must have extra backing, extra sponsorship, and I hope that they have, because we keep saying that we struggle to get sponsors. We struggle to get the amount of money that has been splashed around in Australia and New Zealand. And you just think to yourself, if you've got the dough, then you can get the players. And look, Myler is the director of rugby, and he's got to at least start to do something. But he can't do anything unless someone's come up with a big checkbook.
Yeah, they've been 11th in the table at the moment. They've been out of the playoff picture for a couple of years now. That there might be a change of culture coming at the club. But, Stevo, the fact that Hull Kingston Rovers are going so well puts added pressure on them, doesn't it, on the black and whites on the west side of the city, eh?
It always will. It's a very simple equation. You're either red or white or black or white, and you'd never change course. If you're born in that area and it's black and white, then you stick black and white. And you're a very brave person if you're going to go over to the opposite colour. And
Yeah,
that's how
true.
it always has been on a Humberside, because the competition is fantastic when both sides are hitting the high spots. There's nothing better in Super League, or even well before then, for both sides to be at the top of the table.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. If the two sides in Kingston upon Hull are going well, the game is in good shape. Lee Briers is coming home, Stevo. We speculated about this last week, and he's joining St. Helens, where it all began. That's the whisper, not yet confirmed, of course, by Mike Rush and Eamon McManus there. But he's on his way back to the place where it all began for him, way back in the 90s, to complement the coaching staff. I just wonder what it means for Paul Wellens long term.
Well, I think Paul Wellens is smart enough to realise that sometimes you need help. Making decisions very quickly or taking a long time sometimes can just wear you down. Sometimes it can just put you off in the direction that you want to be going. I think it's a great capture. I think it's wonderful that Briers, who's made a real name for himself down under at the Brisbane Broncos, especially with doing the defensive side of things, but he was a superb halfback. So therefore, any of those youngsters that are coming through at St. Helens, and believe you me, I've seen quite a few games of the St. Helens juniors, and they've got some cracking players coming through. And what better than to bring back one of the best halfbacks that the modern game has seen to help them improve? It's a wonderful move by St. Helens.
Yeah, and it'd be good to have Lee Briers back in this country. It's still on Saints a long time, Steve, a long time since we've seen them open the door and let their top players go, like Lewis Dodd and Tommy Makinson, who are on the way to pastures new next year. But they also have a shocking injury list at the minute. Makinson, Whitley, Knowles, Walmsley, Joe Batchelor, Wingfield, Matautia, and now Conrad Hurrell. He's out for the rest of the season. I mean, they're doing it really, really tough, aren't they, on the injury front?
Yeah, and there's very little you can do about it. It's just that you sort of live and hope that you can scratch your way through and make sure, and I'm pretty certain that they will make the playoffs, but one doesn't know. It can just turn on maybe 2 or 3 injuries, and as you've just mentioned, there's so many injuries. Not that St. Helens are on their own. All the other clubs are having problems in that department as well. But it's all a matter now of hanging in. And as I said before, I think it's a marvellous move to bring the likes of Briers to help Paul Wellens.
And the Aussie press reporting that Tristan Saylor might be coming with him as well. Now, this fella's a pacey fullback or standoff half, isn't he? So, the playing roster might just be getting improved as well in 2025.
Yeah, well, like most of the stuff that I say to you, Eddie, in regards to what's happening down under, most of it is probably flying kites in the sky and just hope that they keep up there. It's the difference between the two is that think of like football in this country, where it's 6-7 pages in the newspaper. That's what it's like in Australia with rugby league. And that's why I'm thankful that I'm involved with a podcast, because we at least can talk about the greatest game of all.
Let's talk about the action over the past week. Hey, Michael Maguire, what a job he did to conjure up a New South Wales series win in the State of Origin down under. He won 14-4 in Brisbane. They lost the first game 38-10, but Maguire somehow conjured up this comeback. And what a game it was. You can see why the State of Origin takes all the headlines in Australia, Steve-O. There were pushing and shoving, and there were riots and a whole host of stuff going on. But nobody involved with all of that gets a suspension. Nobody goes up in front of the beak. It's hey, lads, hey, when it comes to State of Origin, isn't it?
Well, some of the older players, like myself, and many of years gone by, they'll just look at you and say, yeah, it was exciting, but was there a punch thrown? Now, if you started throwing and kicking and whatever, which we have seen in the past, but they don't do that now because the repercussions that you'll be suspended for 4 or 5 weeks, it's not worth it. But it brings back that fire. And it's all about supporting the Blues or the Maroons. And I've said it before, we have to be careful at international level, because a lot of the youngsters coming through, and I've said it so many times, is that the youngsters in Australia, they feel that the greatest contest of all is not internationals, but it is the State of Origin.
I agree completely, Steve. But when you see the spectacle that we saw in the State of Origin decider last week, you can understand why youngsters have that feeling. And you've got to be a thinker as well. You've got to get your tackle technique absolutely spot on. You can't be flattening people. You can't be hitting them around the head. But those days are gone, Steve, aren't they? Gone.
Well, thankfully, yes. I I only have to look at myself in the mirror and say, I wish they'd be gone a long time before then. But look, to watch that game was outstanding. It had everything.
Who would have predicted Castleford to beat Catalan, Huddersfield to beat Salford after the Giants' recent problems, but Luke Robinson seems to have got them going again after Ian Watson's sacking. He says he wants the job full time. But the biggest shock coming at Hull, where the Black and Whites, 11th, as we say in the table, beat top of the table Wigan. And they've set alight the race for the League Leaders' Shield when it looked like it was a foregone conclusion.
Well, I'm glad that has occurred because, it'll be a kick up the backside for Wigan. It'll be a wonderful uplift for the Hull area and the Black and Whites. And at the start of the season, everybody knew that they were going to struggle. And I say, fair play to them. Well done. Well done. A lot of people are saying, Wigan were off the boil and this, that and the other. You can only play what the opposition will allow you to play. So therefore, Hull must have played better. And they say, they were off the boil. There are reasons why people can get off the boil, because if you tackle them hard, they won't come running as hard. It's a simple equation, and I'm so glad, because the worst thing that can happen is that, similar to what we have in Australia, is the fact that the West Tigers, they've had the wooden spoon for the last 4 seasons. Now, they don't have relegation, which is good in one way, but it's not good for the fans. It's not good for the image of rugby league in general. But they are fighting back to try to get back to that level. And it's great for me to see that there's upsets.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, that's what we want. We want people to turn up at the match and not really know who's going to win. Do you think Wigan possibly were a bit fatigued by all the big games they've had recently? I mean, let's take nothing away from Hull, as you say. They held on with 12 men at the end as well when they had a man sent to the sin bin. But Wigan, they've been through the mill with the Challenge Cup final, and you can't play well 27 weeks of the season non-stop, can you? You just can't do it.
Well, you're trying to give them an excuse as well, Eddie. The fact is that they were beaten by a better side.
Of course they were.
And if you start trying to find out the reason, we were tired of this, that and the other. Yes, I can see that people don't play 100% every single game. You can have good games, you can have bad games. I understand that. But the opposition were good enough to prevent you from winning, whether you're 100%, 90% or whatever. You try telling Hull that, the only reason you won was because Wigan was, they had this and they had that, and they had a problem. The reason why Hull won is because they were the better team on the day. Simple.
And what a game now on Friday. Wigan against Warrington. Warrington winning at Saints last weekend, down to 12 men after 20 minutes and 11 following a sin bin. Sam Burgess doing a remarkable job, and he was mic'd up by the Sky team. What an insight into the coaching of Burgess, hugging his players as they went on and off the field. Bring me home, he said. Don't worry about adversity. We've done this before. Great stuff. Great stuff for the telly audience.
Was it ever? And congratulations to Sky for being able to dig deep. There's not many coaches, Eddie, will just say, right, come in. This is how we do it. This is what's happening. They often do it at training, and we were involved with Sky for a long time, and we got some great interviews or whatever. But to do it live there, it just brought a new dimension. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And isn't it great to think that in the olden days, some of the coaches used to say, no, I don't want to discuss this. I don't want to. And it is open. It is open to the fact, and well done, Sam Burgess, to just say, listen to my world. And it paid off.
It did pay off, and I bet he had to watch his P's and Q's and remember he had the microphone on his lapel. But thumbs up to him.
He was born and bred in Dewsbury.
I know.
My hometown.
You all speak the Queen's English in Dewsbury. I understand that. Or the King's English, as it should be now.
100%, Eduardo.
Look, reports this week are talking to Sam. that the talks are now ongoing for a 12-month extension to Burgess's coaching deal at Warrington. And all the lure of the NRL return still never far away. But I really hope that Warrington managed to keep Sam Burgess in Super League, because he's a breath of fresh air.
Well, that's the reason why Warrington want to extend the contract. The biggest problem that they're going to have to overcome is that Wayne Bennett is going back to South Sydney. And of course, we all know that that Burgess was one of the great players when they won the title down under. So therefore, he's got a good relationship with Bennett, who everybody knows is going back and going away from the Dolphins and is going back to the old stomping ground of South Sydney. They're very, very close friends. And it's going to be difficult for Warrington to be able to sort of convince him to stay for another 12 months. I hope he does, because it's been a new breath of fresh air, hasn't it? Especially for you and your suffering Warrington fans for so many years.
Now, you see, you're doing what everybody does. You see, because you live in the town, you think you're all... Listen, I was never a Warrington fan, particularly. I used to love the fact that they were going well, because I only had to travel 20 minutes and I was home and back from the job. So it was perfect for me. But yeah, I agree with you. Sam's been a fantastic breath of fresh air. I want to see Russell Crowe at the Warrington Stadium, Steve. Well, I suppose if he comes, the alarm bells will be ringing, because they think he's brought a first-class ticket going back to Australia for Sam, won't they?
Well, of course. I mean, they're very close friends as well, and rightly so, because the great actor is involved with South Sydney, has been for quite some time, pumped in a lot of money, millions, so they say. So it's going to be difficult for Warrington to maybe convince him. Will someone say, well, here's X to keep him there? You've got to be careful on the salary cap, not just with the players, but what you pay the coaches, etc., and so forth. But the hardest thing is finding the money.
I know. Well, they've got some good backers at Warrington. Let's see. Hull Kingston Rovers, by the way, they're still in the mix, 11 on points with the said Warrington Wolves. What a great win at Leeds for them. Brad Arthur's first game in charge as the Leeds boss. Mikey Lewis again, a shining light for the Rovers. Leeds are still in the running for a playoff place, but only just. It's a must-win at Huddersfield this week, isn't it?
Yes, and it won't be easy, because fair play to Huddersfield. You know, they have a new coach who's in there, and quite frankly, after the episode over the last weekend, they should give him the job full time. He's obviously done a very, very good job, and it's the sort of competitive games that we need, Eddie. It's a matter of life and death when you talk about rugby league. That, you know, can we stay within reach of having the playoffs?
And little Luke Robinson, hoping that he will get the nod and will be the Huddersfield coach moving forward. Brad Arthur, by the way, on this short-term deal, he's talked enthusiastically about this possible Perth appointment that you mentioned last week. He said he's in the running for the new NRL franchise as the head coach role. Go back to what we were talking about last week. You know, is it a good move to have a man coming in only for 14 weeks? He can't say to a player, you won't be here next year, because his likelihood is he's not going to be there next year. Confusion,
I think, is the word. Or is it desperation? They're the two words that spring to mind in regards to bringing a coach over from Australia. And we mentioned it last week, is the fact that they're bringing over a coach that is coaching the side that's in the bottom two of Super League, of the NRL, should I say. It isn't as though you're bringing over, say, Wayne Bennett. And I'm not having a shot at Leeds having to say, well, we'll bring him over, bring someone over. Why couldn't they have just stayed with the assistant coaches that they had before? Remember the Rob Barrow game, and everyone lifted? I thought it would have been a good idea to say, right, you brought us the victory that we always wanted. especially on that particular day, stay with it rather than bring someone over for 14 weeks. It confused me. Maybe that's another word I should use.
Confused.com. They're only 4 points off the playoffs, Leeds, but time is running out. They've got to start winning. They've got to start winning soon. No question about that whatsoever.
But is it going to be difficult to say this guy who's only been there for this will be his third week, I think, that he'll be involved at the Rhinos. Can just speech and maybe changing a few techniques, can it be that helpful? We'll have to wait and see. But I know a lot of Leeds fans, they're confused as well and saying, how much would it have cost to bring him over, this, that and the other? And it isn't as though that we're world beaters. And it isn't as though we brought over a coach that's a world beater. And you've got to look at these facts as the fans do. And this is the one beautiful thing about rugby league fans is they don't mind what they say. They'll come straight to the point. They won't beat around the bush.
And neither will we. And that's podcast number 121 done and dusted. Fantastic weekend of rugby league lying ahead. The sun is shining at last, Stevo. Summer has arrived. You have a good weekend. Have you got anything planned? You're not heading off, are you? We'll get back to you next week, will we?
Listen, I'm not like you, Eduardo. I do not have a cruise sort of planned.
A cruise calendar? You must have a cruise calendar.
I think you're on your 8th cruise this year.
No.
Either way, enjoy it. I think you're going to, as far as I know, I think you're going down to the south of France.
Yeah, but that's not for a long, long time. I'm going to see what the wine is really like down there and see if you're telling me, as you normally do, if you're telling me porky pies, okay? That's later on in the year. I'll be here next week, will you?
Yep.
Let's raise the flags. See you in a week's time.
Take care.